Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And today I have back with me Jeffrey Hazlett. Jeffrey is the founder and CEO of C Suite, and we're going to talk about his latest book. So, Jeffrey, first of all, welcome back and thank you again for taking the time to visit with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Jeffrey, could you remind our audience of your professional background and your current role?
Well, I don't know if we have enough time, but I'll do my best. No. I bought and sold over 250 companies, about 25 billion in transactions, both public and private companies. Serve on a number of corporate boards today, a number of them both private and public. I think I'm on four publicly traded boards today. Publicly traded companies. I'm a former chief marketing officer for Eastman Kodak, Fortune 100 company. I've been a primetime host on Bloomberg and now a host on television for C Suite Radio and C Suite TV.
So, in between all of that, you've written your latest book. And I
Well,
wanted to
actually,
start with
yeah. I was going to jump in. It's not my latest book, but I know and the reason I say that is we're actually promoting the book, and everybody keeps thinking it's a new version of that book. But no, we're going old school, and it's the mirror test. It's the very first book I wrote. And back in 2010, but we're updating a lot of the content and, of course, getting the message out there because right now more and more people need to hear about it.
well, that makes this podcast all the more interesting because the things that I read in the mirror book and the things that you talk about to me now become more significant that you're applying them literally after the world has changed over the past 3 years. And it demonstrates to me the time tested nature of what you have written about. So then let me ask what led you to write the book initially, but more importantly, what led you to update it?
Well, I tell you, to write it initially was, I was just coming out of Eastman Kodak, was leaving, and my, by the way, I had this agent. She kept saying, "Write a book, write a book, write a book." For like 10, 15 years, she was saying that. And finally, I said, "You know what? I'm going to leave Kodak. I'm going to do it." And so then I started thinking about what rules would I want to have, or how would I apply to knowing whether my business would be good or bad. I just spent 4 years at Eastman Kodak, going through a huge digital transformation, kind of restarting that company. Of course, eventually it ran out of room and did not succeed in the way that we would have loved to. It went bankrupt back in about 9 years after I left it. So, but it was during that time period we made a lot of transformation. So it was a great chance for me to be able to look ahead and say, be ready for these trends, be ready for these things, which, as you said, all came true, all applicable for today. So it's for me going back and updating. It's about saying, look what we said then and what we're saying now, and it's the same. It's tried and true, tried and true.
You have a longtime collaborator named Jim Eber.
Yeah.
How have you worked with Jim over the years now that you've had multiple books with him?
Yeah, Jim and I've done 4 books. In fact, this was the first business book he'd ever written. In fact, before that, he'd done a cookbook on chocolate. So, I was kind of like his dessert. So that's the way we describe it. And it's funny because Jim and I get along so well. Haven't talked to him for quite a while because we haven't been doing a book. But when we're in the book mode, we are in the book mode. And sometimes his wife will say, "Quit speaking Jeff Hazlett," you know, because he gets into that language sometimes. But yeah, we had a great collaboration. He's just a wonderful ghostwriter, and then he's been able to do a lot of different business books afterwards. He's so packed. I don't even know if he had time for me if we wanted to do another book.
So let's turn to the book because you start with a great story, and it's
Yeah.
about Murphy the spy.
Oh yeah.
Could you tell us the story of Murphy the spy and why that was such a perfect metaphor or analogy for the overall subject matter of the book?
Well, it kind of gets to the whole theme, right? It does because of the tried and true that we're going to talk about. It's about Murphy the spy who's sent over to Ireland for a secret mission, and he goes. Well, it's an agent that's sent over to Ireland for a secret mission, and he goes and reports at a certain time, certain place where he's supposed to be. And then he asks for Murphy. He asks for so and so, and then it goes through where he has to go to 2 or 3 different people. And finally, the guy says, "Oh, you're looking for Murphy the spy," which meant there were no secrets in anywhere in this village, none whatsoever. And that's what we learn in business. There are no secrets. It's all the same. Everybody's coming to me today and say, "Oh, it's about the relationship." I said, "When the hell did it stop being about the relationships?" "Oh, it's about this." When did it ever stop being about that? And so we seem to think we invent new things all the time when it's all tried and true. It's all been there. It's all out in front of us. We all know what it is. It's transparent as it could be. It's just we failed to notice it. We failed to take the mirror test to find out whether it was real.
And that's, I've read several of your books now, and there are several themes that run throughout, and they are the basics, but they're ways to help you ask questions about the basics, see the basics, and implement the basics and execute within your organization. But let's start with the mirror test.
Yeah.
What are the three mirror tests?
Well, first one's proof of life. I mean, do you fog the mirror? When we were Boy Scouts, Tom, or Weeblos, or maybe Cub Scouts, they used to teach us that if we found a body laying on the ground, you thought it might be dead. What did you do? You grabbed your belt buckle, or you grabbed a mirror and you held it up to the person's nose and mouth. And if they fogged the mirror, they were alive. And that's what we have to do. So the first one is that. The second one is leadership. It's all about leadership in a company. I interview, as you do, CEOs and C-level executives from all types of businesses, whether they be small businesses, startups, or they're multi-billion-dollar companies, some of the biggest companies in the world. And the number one thing is always about talent and leadership, right? How to use your talent in such a way. And so, but leadership is a big one. And the third one, hey, bottom line. It's your bottom line. You know, I'm sitting here in a brand new office in a company that I'm on the board for, and we're launching a new media company. And I'm sitting here working with them, and I said one rule: if it doesn't lead to sales or to conversions, that's listeners or viewers, we're not doing it. And so you have to get really focused in on the bottom line, because that's in the end what we're trying to drive. Because you can do all the things in the world, but if you don't have profit, if you don't have money to be able to put back into the business, you got nothing.
You have a term or an acronym called RACE, which is you using the phrase always the race.
Yeah.
What's the race and why is that so important that people ask those questions and think
It's
about those
it's
things?
so funny. I serve on another board, another startup that we're doing, where we're actually putting Kevlar into paint that we put on cars. Kevlar. So it's like bulletproofing your not literally bulletproofing your car, but it keeps the nicks and dings and everything else. And so I used that formula just yesterday. So it's funny you should bring that up. But let me tell you, I'm not the author of that. It's an old public relations term that I learned back in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, and it means research, action, communication, evaluation. And that's something every marketer should do. First, you research, look at your audience, who it is, what kind of message. You put the end of the action plan, you communicate it, then you see, hey, did it work or not work, or what can we change? And so everything is cyclical. This week I'm interviewing a ton of some of the world's largest, biggest, most famous economists in the world, talking about the upcoming recession, right? And one of the cool things that one of them remind me is, says, Jeff, I don't know if you remember this, but they taught you in economic school that everything is cyclical, or it's earth shattering, it's ending, right? There's either a finite end or it's a cycle. And okay, that's what race is all about in business. That's what we do every single day. For the most part, as you know, Tom, most of the things that we do, no one's going to die. So if we make a big mistake, no one's going to die. And so this is a research, action, communication, evaluation is a great thing for us to be able to do it.
And the reason I like that acronym so much, I've heard you talk about that before, is you can implement that in a traditional business setting, or you can be a lawyer like me putting in a legal plan, and it's the
Yeah.
exact same formula. It's all process.
Yeah, you could
It's
do it in a
repeatable
church,
process.
a political campaign, anything you want. You could apply that to.
So you have 20 questions to ask, but I want to start by focusing on number 11 because I always thought that was the most important. But you've got it at 11, which is what is your unique selling perspective or uh, uh, unique
Positioning,
selling positioning?
yeah, you bet.
A- And so, what's the is it that just one of many? Because I thought the uniqueness always was number one.
No, there's a lot of things you got to take in consideration, and the most importantly is what problem you're solving, and that's really what this is about. My son, who's a chief marketing officer for us at the C-Suite Network, probably one of the brightest people I've ever met in my life. And, even though he's my son, I'm always surprised by that because I know where he came from. You know, but uh, he always says, "What problem are we solving?" And that's really what it is. So, what's your unique selling proposition, positioning, whatever the P word you want to use? But it's really about how you stack up against the others and what value you're providing to somebody else. And it's always around that problem. And if you can find out what that problem you're solving, you can make it real simple. And the simpler you can make the value proposition, the better it is. And you can't be so unique that you're the only one. Because if you're the only one, then you're not solving anything, right? Because nobody else is wanting to tackle that market. So, but you want to do is spend a great deal in terms of being able to differentiate yourself from everybody else in the problem that you're solving, and it's all that relates to the value.
Jeffrey, the next point I wanted to raise was the one I thought was the most significant uh, in this book and the most aha moment for me. But once again, he wrote this nearly 15 years ago.
Yep.
And it was a conversation around social media. So now that I know this book was written in 2010, I understand social media was more in
No.
its infancy back then.
Yeah, I did.
But
By the way, I did a presentation yesterday just on the book, and I went back and grabbed the slides that I did back in 2010. And I looked at what the markets were, for each of the social media. At that time, Facebook had 450 million users, right? 450 million. You know how many billion they're at today. That tells
right.
you how long ago I was talking about this and talking about, I know where you're going on the in the community. So ask me the real question you want to know, and I'll get to it.
So the insight for me was, Tom, you're not talking to a community. Tom, you're talking to communities. And when I thought about that in the corporate world, I mean, it really was aha. And that means in the corporate world, literally from the board of directors to the C suite to middle managers to everyone in the organization. And that um, whether you believe a corporation has multiple stakeholders
Yeah.
or any other group, that you're not talking to one community. So you may have to talk differently to different communities, but you may have to craft your message so that everyone is included in it. And that was really what I wanted to ask you about. Why the communities, plural?
Well, let's imagine it's about reach, discovery, and then in some way you want to say it's conversion or change that you're trying to drive or do. And so with each one of those communities, you got to speak in a different way. You have to show up in a different way because why? They're communities. So let's just take in a corporation. I can talk in the boardroom differently, and I have to, than I would talk typically on the line in a plant because they're just different communities and they don't care about the same things. They obviously care about what we do as a company and everything else. But my point is, there's different priorities in front of those people, right? And so you have to be able to represent different communities, speak to different communities because you got to win them over. And if I'm even going to be evangelistic or in terms of evangelical in terms of my messaging, then I've got to meet the people where they want to be met. And I can't just speak to them the way I would like normally speak because for some people, the way I speak in terms of how aggressive I am and the way I'm, rapid fire, that's not a good way to communicate to some people. And so you have to learn to be able to address communities where they need to be met.
You and I was very appreciative that you went through a little bit of your professional background when we started this podcast, because the common theme in that story was
Yeah.
Jeffrey Hazlett.
Yeah.
Whether it was in the corporate world, whether it was an entrepreneurial world, whether it was the entertainment world, whatever it is, today's world, it's Jeffrey Hazlett. And so you've always been selling yourself. In some of the other books I've had the privilege to read that you have written, you've made clear that transparency is a critical element, or you believe in leadership. And does that hold true in your personal brand and what you have done and how it's allowed you to carry forward
Yeah.
literally to this day?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm laughing because this week, somebody was saying, well, I don't like the way you're saying it. I said, look, I'm going to be transparent. If I'm telling you, I'm going to punch you in the face, I'm going to punch you in the face, and I'm not holding anything back. What you see is what you get. I'm not going to play the political games, inside of companies and corporations. Sometimes some people do. I just don't have time for it, in my life in terms of where I want to go. So I focus in on truly being transparent. But here's the big thing, and I said this back then, and I'll say it today, that you have to become a personal brand, because you are. A brand is nothing but a promise delivered. So what is your, promise? What is it you're delivering? That becomes your real brand, and that's who you are. I mean, Tom, the work that you've done to be, the credible person that you are, with 20 some podcasts, and representing that legal community that you do, well, that's your brand. And so, but if you sell yourself, you sell the company. If you sell the company, you sell yourself, and that's the distinction. We've become attached with those companies, and just like pro ball players have become attached with the teams, you still see, LeBron James, but you still think, that guy from Ohio, not always from the Lakers. When you see Tom Brady, you don't always see Tampa Bay. You see the Patriots, and so that, there's a connection to that. And so, but that's why you have to sell yourself. You have to be out there, because you take on the attributes of the brand takes on the attributes of you.
Another key theme I've seen in your books is culture,
Yeah.
and it's a positive culture. It's the right culture. So, could you say a few words about culture and your thoughts on that today?
Yeah, culture. A culture of a company is made up by you and me. I am Kodak, you're Kodak, we're all Kodak, and collectively, that's what the company becomes. Whether you can't just say this is what our culture is going to be. You have to really truly live it. It becomes the norms and mores of your society, of that group that you represent, and that you are part of a big family. And so you have to really develop the culture and understand what the culture is going to be like, and then recruit people in that are similar to your culture, or at least, we're going to fit in. Because I've seen people who've gotten fired within weeks or days because they just didn't fit in the culture. I've seen people go into a company and die because the culture just killed them. I've seen businesses fail because they could not change or morph the culture quickly enough to be able to react to what's going on. So culture is a CEO spends a lot of time on the brand. The CEO spends a great amount of time on the culture, in addition to raising money and doing all the financial stuff that they have to do. But that's a big part of the job.
As we move to the end, you have a great reading list. So I just had to say, one, it's a great reading list, but two, why was some of these books so significant to you?
Well, first, I wanted to put the books that I really thought shaped my life, and so there was a number of them. Think and Grow Rich, and How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm just thinking back on that list. So we're reflective of who we are, what we eat, how we eat, so that, the food we put in our bodies affects what we do. And I think the stuff that we put into our mind is affects us of who we are. So I think you should be reflective of a good reading list.
What's next for Jeffrey?
I'm having fun. I'm running the C-suite. I don't run the day to day. That's Trisha, and we got other things. I'm doing a lot of corporate boards, serving as a consultant to lots of different companies. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, I'm working with a Mexicano Media, which is a Hispanic media company, which is interesting. I'm the only Democrat, non-Hispanic on the whole group, but I'm involved, so it's fun for me. I'm learning a lot and having a great deal of fun. Which is good. But what's more importantly, there's going to be a great deal of money to be made from it. And that I really like.
Well, Jeffrey, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode, but I was wondering if our listeners wanted more information on C Suite, what would be the best place for them to go?
Well, just email me, jeffrey.hazlett at c-suitenetwork.com. Reach out to me on social media. Go to info at c-suitenetwork.com. We'll just find us. But if you go through any social media and you reach out to me, I'll make sure it's me getting back to you.
And we're going to link to the book in the show notes as well. And I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me today.
Tom, and thank you for being one of our top broadcasters on C-Suite Radio. You knock it out of the park every single month, and it's just good to have somebody with your caliber and credentials on the network. So thank you.